Hello and welcome to this podcast. We're looking at the social impact of technology and the dot point on defining technology. In this podcast, what I'm going to do is we're going to look at some data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and compare the trends in household use of ICT over time using their data sets. The first data set we're going to look at is that of households with internet and broadband access. And as you can see from the year 2006-7 to 2012-13, both internet access and broadband access by households has started to increase. As you might be aware, the federal government over the past couple of years has been rolling out the National Broadband Network, and older technologies such as ADSL and dial-ups, which comprise most of the household connections today, will be replaced over time with the National Broadband Network. If you look at the graph below, the households with internet access by state or territory, you can see that most states and territories have grown in proportion to the number of families or households that have access to the internet. The exception to that, of course, is New South Wales and the ACT. The ACT holds or enjoys the highest proportion of households with access to the internet. Certainly that's followed by the Northern Territory, Western Australia, Queensland, Victoria, and finally New South Wales. And there are obviously some reasons why that has occurred. The largest growth you could see there is coming from the Northern Territory and also Victoria and Queensland with the broadband rollout, in addition to that in Tasmania, which accounts then for the number of households having greater access to the internet. When you look at the proportion of people who have access to the internet, most of those are in capital cities, which is the solid black line, and you can see that the rest of each of the state or territory, i.e. those that live in rural and or remote locations, has also started to increase over the period 2006-7 to 2012-2013. So satellite technologies, for example, that bring the internet to the outback have resulted in more households being able to connect either via satellite, using satellite phone, or mobile technologies such as 4G networks. When we look at who's using the internet and where they're using it, most people are accessing the internet from home, a large proportion at work, and then you can see that there are other examples there from neighbours, friends and relatives, fewer people at an internet cafe, shopping malls, free Wi-Fi hotspots at school, the public library, and a very small proportion at other places as well. So you can see that most people are using the internet at home. So how often do they use it? Well, you can see that in the time 2006-7 to 2008-2009, the numbers of people over the age of 15 who use it every day has started to increase. You can see that the proportion of people who use it weekly, monthly, and yearly have fairly much decreased over that time as well. So what we can conclude from this diagram is that people are accessing the internet every day, and fewer people access it irregularly, and that's evident over time. When we look at what people are most likely to use the internet for at home, they're most likely to use it, as you can see with the purple line, for personal reasons, then followed by education, particularly for the groups 15 to 17, 18 to 24, or work for those groups older, 25 to 34, and also for the groups 55 to 64. Now that's grown over time as well. As you can see, that the shift changes when people enter the workforce, fewer people using the internet for education. However, with the rise of massive open online courses, for example, such as those offered by Open Universities Australia, it affords a lot of people the opportunity to undertake further education while they're still working. With respect to the use of online communication technologies, you can see that generally there is a growth from 2008 to 2009 in the types of activities that people are undertaking. So for example, we can see that the numbers of people participating in social networking, email, blog, instant messaging, wikis, news feeds, and using the internet to make phone calls such as VoIP, voice over internet protocol, or services such as Skype or Google Hangouts have started to increase over time as well. As you can see, probably the most popular service that the internet provides for people in terms of communication technologies is email, followed by news feeds, and closely followed by social networking sites as well. In terms of who uses the internet, mostly those with a bachelor degree or above, closely followed by those with an advanced diploma or a diploma, are the ones that most likely use that resource for both for work and for study. The other major source of use of information communication technologies is on online purchases. You can see there that it has grown over time. This was taken in 2010. You can see that people are most likely to purchase travel goods, book tickets, buy household items, books, magazines and newspapers, clothing, etc. Some of these will begin to shift over time. So for example, what we'll experience over time is that more people will download music and computer software via the internet, and we're going to see, or we are experiencing, a decline in the numbers of people purchasing CDs and DVDs. In fact, most computers these days, and certainly tablets, don't have a facility to insert a CD or a DVD, and with the rise of services such as Stan and Netflix, for example, fewer people will be buying those into the future. Access to services, particularly government services, are also on the rise there, and also doing your own banking using financial products, and also making investments on the stock market are also things that people spend a fair bit of time on the internet in doing. Finally, we see in fact, what happens when people don't access the internet. There are fewer people who don't access the internet, but there are differences between those in the 15 to 17 year age group and those in the 65 plus age group. So for example, the older a person gets, the less need they feel that they have to access information and communication technologies via the internet. But there are certain differences that you notice between those two groups. So for example, those 65 and over prefer to shop in person, where those 15 to 17 will do that on the internet. Fewer 15 to 17-year-olds have security concerns, more so in the 65 plus age group. You'll find that for 15 to 17-year-olds, there are people who do things for them, such as make online purchases for them or access services, with fewer 65-year-olds who have that available to them. And one of the biggest drivers, obviously, in the 15 to 17-year group is that they do not have a credit card. So therefore, the capacity to participate in online shopping, for example, to buy tickets, to download music, etc., is much less in that group than those 65 and over who do have the means and the card in which to make their purchases. So I hope this is a useful little podcast. Remember that we're examining the data to compare the trends over time. I would encourage you to investigate the link on the first slide to take you to the ABS site and to have a look at their resources.